Howdy y'all, welcome back to the channel. Thank you for being here. Today we're going to talk about the mythical Mount Meru. And this is a topic that I've heard Divergent talking about a lot lately. And it's really interesting, and I just wanted to dive into what the mainstream narrative has to say about this Mount Meru. Now, I will leave links to his work down below and some other good, interesting links. But basically, you can pause the video here if you want to read what an educator of cosmology has to say about ancient Mount Meru. But I will try and break it down here quickly for you, and then just give you some of the interesting details that were associated with architecture that was built because of Mount Meru. So, in the Hindu, Jain, and Buddhist ancient cultures, they believed that Mount Meru was the physical, metaphysical, and spiritual center of the universe, basically the center of the world from which all other points revolved. Now, in their writings, in their teachings, Mount Meru is roughly 672,000 miles high, or 1,082,000 kilometers. And they say it has 4 different faces, and they are made of gold, crystal, ruby, and most interestingly, lapis lazuli. Why I mentioned the lapis lazuli, I've talked about it in previous videos. This was a very important stone to the ancients and the only way that they could depict the color blue. It also is interesting to note that the side of Mount Meru in the myth that always faced the earth was the lapis lazuli side. And for this reason, the myth says that from earth, this is why you could not see Mount Meru, because lapis lazuli itself was believed to be basically pieces of the sky. It was so blue that it blended in with the sky. And I found that to be very interesting. Now, another aspect of this mythical mountain I want to discuss is that they say it had 5 sacred peaks. And this idea of having peaks or tiers eventually became adopted in nearly all of the Indian architecture. And this is because they wanted to have representations of Mount Meru and the ascension to Mount Meru on their different buildings. So when you see architecture that appears to be tiered in India and basically rises to an apex at the very top, that apex at the top basically represents heaven or enlightenment, depending on how you want to look at it. And they called these sort of structures on top of buildings Pyatthats or Pyatthats. And these were always in tiers, and it was always an odd number of tiers. They believed that even numbers were bad luck. So they had these Pyatthats put on top of nearly all their buildings, and you'll see them in either groups of 3, 5, 7, and on the most royal palaces in India, you'll find that there were up to 9 tiers on this Pyatthats. Now, as I said previously, the apex or the top of these Pyatthats were supposed to represent heaven, and to them, heaven was known as Trayastrimsa. And this is where Sakra, or God, would reside at the very top of Mount Meru. What's very interesting about this is the word Trayastrimsa, when translated, actually becomes a number, and that number is 33. So another way to look at it is you can use Trayastrimsa as an adjective, and it means basically one who belongs to the 33. So if you know anything about societies or different groups that use the number 33 heavily, this sort of lends to that narrative of why they do it. It's a form of heaven or a version of achieving enlightenment. And I just found this to be very, very interesting and sort of explains how we see this idea adopted in later Western cultures. So I'm just going to show you some good examples of these Pyatthats that were put on these buildings all around the Middle East and India and even into Asia. And we're going to look at some of these structures and just notice how they all have this very similar design where there's tiers and the tiers get thinner as you go upwards, and then once you reach the top there is an apex and there is a pinnacle point, and this pinnacle point represents heaven, also known as Trayastrimsa or 33. So obviously that doesn't tell you the full story of Mount Meru. I just wanted to share with you the initial details that I found interesting. I think it's really amazing that we had these buildings in India and the such that were built with these Pyatthats, and they basically represented ascending to heaven or achieving enlightenment. And we see sort of similar buildings built in the West that remind me of the principles that are being used in these Indian constructions. And I just find it really remarkable. And I wonder truly if the buildings in the West and the dome buildings that we talk about, I wonder if they're meant to be representations of a sort of Mount Meru ascension to heaven and enlightenment. And seeing as heaven for these cultures was also synonymous with the number 33, I just find it to be very telling, and I wanted to share all that information with you. Hopefully it was either entertaining or interesting. I thank you for being here and taking the time. Please leave any thoughts or comments that you have down below, and let's break this down together. And I'll see you on the next video.